Let's open up the Black Series 6-inch figure of the Purge Trooper Phase 2 armor from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. We recently binge watched the Obi-Wan Kenobi series again, and it really put me in the mood to go back and open up some of my Black Series Obi-Wan Kenobi figures that I've had tucked away. I picked this Purge Trooper in Phase 2 armor up a little while ago. I picked it up on clearance, so it has a little bit of shelf wear, but I think now's the right time to get it out, particularly since this is such a dark figure. I feel like the black figures in particular look a little bit better out of the packaging. Just you can see the details much better. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up very soon, I'll of course get this figure out of the packaging so we can take a closer look at all of those details. But first, let's take one last look at the packaging. We have pretty standard Black Series packaging here. Of course, we've got that side angle style here. We've got the Black Series Star Wars logo here at the top. Nice big window showing the figure inside. And for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, we have this really interesting blue color accent for this series. Of course, I always associate the blue with Obi-Wan Kenobi. It is his lightsaber color, and I think just blue in the context of the Star Wars universe always feels like a light side color. Here we have that color used for the character name, Purge Trooper Phase 2 armor, and of course that color is also used on the side art here. It's really quite dark and moody. Of course we have sort of a monotone artwork here of the Trooper. It does have some red accents there on the figure, which of course are not used here. We've just got that black and grayscale. I think it's fun that we've got 3 Inquisitors here above and behind. We've got Reva, the Grand Inquisitor, and the 5th brother there in the background. That's really fun, and of course it fades down into that accent color, and this is quite a readable color for the black text here. Purge Trooper Phase 2 armor, nice and clear there. That color stripe is repeated across the back. You can see that this is number 07 from the Obi-Wan Kenobi series of Black Series figures. We've got that art repeated here, a little bit more inset where we can see that really menacing helmet. Can't wait to check out the details of the action figure version of this helmet. It's really quite menacing there. We have a little bit of a bio for Purge Trooper Phase 2 armor, but here it is actually more about the series itself rather than the figure, the character. For some of the series, I think they were trying to avoid spoilers, so we just have a bit of a blurb about the series instead. Obi-Wan Kenobi is set years after the dramatic events of Star Wars Revenge of the Sith, where Kenobi faced the corruption of his friend and Jedi apprentice, Anakin Skywalker turned Sith Lord Darth Vader. Repeated there in a few languages. We have the copyright warning text and everything there, and of course the barcode and stuff down the bottom. A little bit of a side window there, letting in a little bit more light. We've got the Star Wars Black Series logo there, and of course that little peekaboo window there at the top, letting in a bit of light. To me personally, I think this figure is going to look better out because of all of these black details. I think it just needs to be under the light, and particularly since this figure has soft goods. Sometimes, because when these things are just mass produced, they go into their packaging with the soft goods just a little bit wrinkled. I kind of want to go in there and straighten it out, but of course if I was keeping this sealed, I wouldn't be able to do that. So I think personally, I think this one is going to look a little bit better out of the packaging. So let's go ahead and open it up. So now I have the Purge Trooper figure and the blaster rifle accessory out of the packaging so we could take a closer look. And of course I have to start with the figure itself. Now I can properly see all of the details. They are very black. This is just a very black figure. So under the strong lighting, I can see the details better than I could when it was in the packaging. There was just a lot of reflection on that clear plastic window. I think this guy looks pretty cool. Okay, so I'm just going to go over the details because this one does look very similar to a Clone Trooper armor. It is described as Phase 2 armor, of course referencing Phase 2 Clone Troopers. We can see that we have a lot of similarities with the Episode Episode 3 clone troopers there, also known as Phase 2 clone troopers, but we have some really unique pieces here. Of course, we're going to have to start with this really menacing helmet. Of course, it really doesn't look like a clone trooper helmet anymore. We're solidly into the Galactic Empire by this time, so we've got a very stormtrooper helmet, but there's something about those red lenses and the really angular lines. It's giving me some of the sort of Inquisitor helmets, particularly some of the female Inquisitors have sort of these angled helmets. And of course, we've got these sort of flaps here that kind of give me Vader with that sort of angled flare at the back there. And of course, the sort of angled chin. It's giving Galactic Empire, isn't it? Feels very inspired by Darth Vader's helmet. We've got fantastic red paint there for the visor, and we've even got some small silver details here around the chin and painted red stripes here on the side, and the grille is also accented in silver there. All the sort of details that are just very hard to see when it is in the packaging. Pretty straight and clean in terms of the helmet lines in the back. You can sort of really start to see that sort of Vader shape there in the back. A little bit shorter, of course, but I really like that. Another unique component of this figure is the Commander's pauldron here. The red color denotes a rank here. This is a Commander's pauldron. Doesn't say Commanders on the packaging. It is just called a Purge Trooper, not Purge Trooper Commander. But I think that this is a really fun one. If you want to army build this figure, you can see that this one is kind of just attached around the neck. So if you want to remove it, you could pop the helmet off and take this one off. It's kind of shaped quite nicely to kind of sit on the shoulder, but there aren't any sort of additional straps or anything keeping that in place. It's fairly tidily painted here from the front. We've got a little silver detail and that dark red there. A little bit of a paint wobble here at the back, very minimal. But overall, I think it just adds a little bit of something extra to this figure. Very cool. Okay, so moving down, I can see the sort of shape of standard Phase 2 clone trooper armor here, but we've got interesting sort of additional sculpted details here. Not too much in the way of paint job. We've got a tiny little red button over on this side. And of course, moving down, we've got a clone trooper belt again with some additional red painted details here on the boxes. And of course, the bicep armor is fully red as well. This one again, it looks fairly tidy in the paint job, maybe just a little bit of a variance here on that lower edge. Still, it's not really spilling over. This one here is fully black. No red details on this arm. No details on the little compad or any of the little button details here on the back of that forearm armor. And this one is clear. We don't have any kind of extra additional sculpted details on this side. Moving down, I think this is pretty standard clone trooper armor. I do have another Black Series clone trooper figure to compare to very shortly. But to my eyes, that looks pretty standard. I don't see any additional sort of greeblies or paint effects. But of course, we have to talk about the soft goods, the cama here. Of course, this is giving me very clone trooper vibes as well. A lot of the higher ranking clone troopers had cama like this. And I think it's attached under the belt. When I was holding it, I can wiggle the belt around a little bit, and it seems to be firmly attached there underneath and around on the back. It's fairly neatly attached under the belt, which is nice. Sometimes the soft goods, if they're not attached very neatly with the plastic components, it really sort of stands out, and I think it draws your eye in a negative way. We have got a split up the back for leg movement. This one here, I'm not sure if this is intentional. We've got a very straight line on the left side, and then on the right side we've got just a little bit of an angle, and then it kind of goes at a slightly different angle here. So I'm not really going to notice it when it's just kind of draped in the back, but just that kind of point there just kind of caught my eye. I'm hoping that this will perhaps loosen up a little bit with age and of course with me handling it, because As I pointed out before when it was in the packaging, this was kind of a little bit crinkled in the packaging, and that's just going to take a little bit to loosen up. It does have a painted red stripe down this front edge, which does give it a bit of a rougher, sort of more rigid, is the proper word I'm trying to get to, a bit more of a rigid feel to this. I can sort of feel where the paint, but it does kind of seal the edges there nicely. Unlike some fabrics used on the Black Series line, I'm thinking like some of the Vader cloaks and things like that, this one doesn't feel like it's going to fray, but then it also isn't a large component of fabric, so I'm not really worried about it fraying too much with handling. Another nice painted red stripe edging there. It almost gives the feeling of like there being a little strand of wire. That's the kind of rigidity it gives to the front edge, so it tends to hang very nice and straight if they aren't packaged a little bit wonky. I'm hoping that perhaps over time this one will straighten it out. Perhaps if I just kind of use some gentle pressure around the leg just to pull that straight, that'll kind of just straighten up, because it kind of wants to bounce back a little bit of a wrinkle there. Not too bad though, nice and tidy. No paint or any other additional details onto the back there. He also has a bit of sort of an extra backpack here, which doesn't have any additional painted details, but it is attached in a permanent fashion. Personally, I quite like that. I sometimes have a bit of a trouble getting some of these backpacks on. Sometimes they're too loose and they just want to fly off, and then sometimes they're just very, very hard to get in place with the sort of some of the pegs. This one is permanently attached. It came with it and I cannot remove it. It looks really tightly aligned, very nice. No paint apps, but we've got some nice little sculpted detail on some of the sides there. And all in all, it looks like it perfectly blends in with the sculpting of this figure. So some interesting additional paint apps there with some additional red sort of splatters. The splashes of red really set this one off. Not a lot of weathering on this one, but I think for the black troopers in particular, I think they look kind of a little bit more fun when they're sort of glossy and just giving a little bit of that Vader menace vibe rather than them being sort of battle worn. They're more of the sort of the elite squad, the ones that aren't pulled out all the time, just in those special circumstances. So we'll quickly go over some of the articulation. I'm expecting pretty standard clone trooper movement here. Helmet, very nice. We can turn that all around. We get some sort of cool posing there. Let's check out the arms. Okay, that is hitting almost straight away. You can see there's not a lot of gap there, and as soon as I get to that, it's hitting. And the shoulders feel a little bit more rigid, to be honest, and they're actually sticking quite close to the biceps. Sometimes they're quite sort of rubbery and sort of more attached with just a small sort of piece of plastic at the top, so you can sort of swing them around. This one feels solidly attached to the arm. I don't know that I'm actually really going to get the arm higher. You can see his torso actually has quite a lot of wiggle to it as I'm trying to move his arm. He's actually swaying side to side instead, and we've got very easy front and back movement, so we've got that instead, I guess. Okay, let's check out. His arm does swing very well, so we've got that. Okay, nice easy there with the elbows. And of course that clone trooper elbow armor does a pretty good job of hiding the articulation. We've got that detailed undersuit sculpting there with the lines. Looks very nice. And pretty much as expected with the hands. Got a nice C grip there on that hand. And on the other hand, we've got a nicely extended trigger finger there. Hopefully that's going to help us hold that blaster nicely. Same sort of articulation here. A little stiffer on this side actually. There we go. And same sort of posability there. I'm hoping we can get a nice two-handed grip on his blaster rifle shortly. So hoping, yes, we've got that same sort of upper thigh swivel, so we can rotate it out. Because the clone trooper armor, I have to lift this up really high. The clone trooper thigh armor gets so close to that cod piece, you kind of have to swivel it to the side in order to raise the leg up. so we can get a little bit of a high step if we really want to. Personally, I'm not too adventurous with my posing. He's going to be standing pretty straight on my display shelf. Again, like the elbows, the knees have that knee plate. Very useful for sort of hiding over the articulation point if we're going to pose them on a shelf with a bent knee. That knee plate there, just coming down, hiding that very nicely. I like that. Some of them, they're kind of a little bit more attached to the shin armor, so when you bend the knee, it kind of disappears with the leg, and it just exposes that joint. Clicky feet, pretty good, nice and stiff, but I can still get some good movement there, because of course I do want him to stand up fairly straight for display. I'm going to spend a little bit of time arranging him before he goes on my permanent display. I want to make sure that my figures are standing up nice and sturdy. He's a little bit wobbly, my particular figure, but then sometimes their ankles are just a little bit, you know, needing that little bit of tweaking to get them to stand up fairly sturdy. So there we go. Let's quickly get his blaster in place. So he doesn't have a Stormtrooper rifle or technically a Clone Trooper rifle. This is the E11D blaster carbine, possibly more well known from the Death Troopers from Rogue One. So this is, I kind of want to say it's a little bit of a shame it's not full black. This is kind of a little bit more of a mid-gray, gunmetal gray. It's got not too much in the way. I don't think there's any paint apps on this actually. Don't think there's anything. So there, I kind of wish it was black. When I put it next to him, you can kind of see the color difference between him and the weapon there. I think it would just be a little bit cooler if it was black, but I know it just has to be the color that it is. So, okay, let's see how well. The handle goes into his hands fairly well. And his fingers not really sticking in there. Is that going in? Of course, these longer weapons do tend to hit a little bit on that bicep armor. I'm going to spend a little bit of time getting these poses just right. And now I do find it can take a little bit of time just finding just the right spot to get there. He's got very tight fingers. There we go. Okay, so always takes a little bit of wrestling there, but I think he holds that fairly well. Nice tight grip there, so I feel like that's going to be quite sturdy for display. Going to straighten that out over time, but overall I think he's really cool. My one is very maneuverable through that upper torso positioning there, but I think he looks really cool, very menacing with that helmet, and I love just that straight black with those red details. He looks fantastic. So I mentioned earlier, I have a Clone Trooper Black Series figure to compare to. This one here is the Elite Squad Trooper. This one is number 3 from the Bad Batch line of a Black Series 6-inch figures. So this one looks pretty dark in the packaging, but as you can see, it's actually a dark gray, especially when we put it next to a true black figure. I think it's really interesting. This one is just a little bit wobbly with his feet. I'm going to have to spend a bit of time adjusting him. So this one does come with a Clone Trooper blaster, and I know that there is a few years between these two, but I think it's kind of interesting because the Purge Troopers are described as wearing Phase 2 Clone Trooper armor, much like the Elite Squad Troopers that of course are, this is from the Galactic Empire, so they're still using Clone Trooper armor. And I think it's really interesting to see these side by side. So if I just put this one's weapon aside for a minute, he really wants to hold it. So we can take a closer look at some of those details like the chest plate. Come on, just let that one go. There we go. Yeah. He had quite a good grip there. So now we can see the differences in the chest. So I can really see just those extra little sculpted details here, and that little googly box there are not present here. We've got very different shoulder bells as well. This one has extra detail lines. It sort of really matches the helmet there as well. This one's got the original kind of Clone Trooper vibe, but the proportions on the chest look very similar. I think maybe this one's just a little bit bigger, but it could just be the sort of overall proportions of the figure. The red, the different shoulder bells, and the pauldron are giving him a slightly wider sort of build. And of course, we've got that extra backpack box there. Very similar in terms of the back. This one is using the older sculpting, the articulation. We can see those old sort of peg styles there for the knees. This one, much better. Look at that articulation in the undersuit, especially when you look at them from the back. Very different articulation. This one just looks like a toy where we've got just pure hinges and pegs. This one, if I can get the camera out of the way, we can see it looks like human legs. We can see a tiny bit of articulation, but with those ribbed undersuits, the lines for the hinges just completely disappear. It's just fantastic. Such a great improvement between these two figures. Absolutely fantastic. Much, much prefer that one. And even just the sculpting on the back of that calf armor as well. Very nice. I like that. Even with the black, I thought the detail might be a little bit harder to read, but it's actually showing up really nicely, even compared to this slightly paler one. Looks like very, very similar in terms of the belt. And this one, it still has very similar sort of articulation at the elbows. Just has those pins at the knees that I am not as big of a fan of as well. But yeah, it's really fun to see these side by side. These ones have the same sort of forearm with that little sort of compad sort of button sculpted in. I think, I don't know, it could be my eyes. The chests look very similar. That tiny little detail sculpted to the side of the clone trooper armor here is not present here. So I know that of course these boxes are going to make it a different sculpt. I'd really have to get out the calipers to see if this is a broader sculpt. Something about it is just reading a little bit of a broader body compared to this one. And I don't think it's just the color. I think they've given it a bigger build, which I like. Very cool. Building up quite the galactic empire. I think these guys look really cool. I like the black finish of it. These ones do look menacing with this dark gray, but there's just something about black that always feels very galactic empire. Now I've got to get all of the Inquisitors out of their packaging, because now I need to bring out all my Inquisitors so I can build a sort of a Purge squad there with some troopers. Because I've been building up my Bad Batch series ones. This guy belongs with my Bad Batch figures, but he kind of looks cool next to some other very dark side Imperial Trooper figures. Very, very cool. So I'll pop this guy out of the way for now. So overall, I think this one is really fun. I'm kind of tempted to pick up at least another one. I think he looks really cool. And I think just about every trooper in an action figure line, you want to build, build them, at least in batches of like 2 or 3, just to kind of flesh out some scenes. I think he looks really cool. I did manage to find this one on clearance. Who knows? Maybe if I hunt around, I can find a second one so that he's got a squad mate there. Really cool. Some really fun detail there. And yeah, I'm so happy about those knees. Really nice to see Hasbro improving, because particularly for me, I'm not too adventurous with my posing. I know that articulation is very important for a lot of collectors. I'm not discounting that if you are really, really a fan of the high level of articulation. I personally love to see the way that the sculpting here has it's almost just disappearing. I'm looking at it going, where is the articulation? It's just disappears in amongst all the lines of that undersuit. Just so nice. And we can still bend the knee very nicely as well. I just really like that. Fantastic. So there you go. Definitely keen to open up more of my Kenobi figures and really build out my Inquisitorius squad with this guy. I think he's really cool. So that is one fantastic Purge Trooper figure for my collection. Really happy with this one. And he looks so much better out of the plastic, so I can see all of those details. The black is just a little bit harder to read with all of the reflection on that plastic window. So there you go. That was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars Black Series 6-inch figure and had a lot of fun. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again really soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Black Series fan, I recently unboxed the Riot Scout Trooper figure. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as our whole Black Series unboxing playlist. This is the way.